I've spent almost 3 years on LinkedIn now, and I keep wondering if I'll ever arrive, not from a certain number of followers, likes, or comments, at the place most creators are sharing from, at that place of wild success. For months now, I've wondered if I'm just a failure or if I'll ever be able to share from that place of I was broke, burned out, and lost. Now I make six figures working 4 hours a day. I wanted to taste that so bad for so long, to know what it's like even for a few seconds, to have even 1 month in my business that I could be truly proud of. So I would have some results, so I would have some authority, so I could finally start making a difference because people would finally believe that I'm capable. But that's just what the internet does. It's a highlight reel. It's a perfect before and after picture, especially on LinkedIn and Instagram. You start to feel like you might never win. You start to feel as if you might never be confident or capable. And you start to feel like a complete imposter. And many people say that imposter syndrome is a good thing, that you're just getting outside of your comfort zone. And sometimes it can be, but that feeling that you're just truly not even remotely good enough is coming from the way people are sharing so performatively and so inauthentically and making you feel like you need to be exactly like them. And so you stop posting at all because you don't have anything worth sharing. You don't have anything that anyone wants to hear. Maybe you will one day, but it's just not your time to speak up. Maybe making six figures working 4 hours a day isn't the threshold, but it's surely not where I'm at right now. I'm too much in the trenches. I've had 3 years of my entire identity being reconstructed. And I keep telling myself no one can learn anything from that. I would probably just be better off pulling back until I have something worth sharing, especially until I have some sort of tangible business results like revenue or a certain dollar amount in my bank account. I should wait until I have a more cohesive aesthetic, until I have an optimized morning routine or a very different nervous system. I need to wait until I have some sort of arrival, not while I'm still at this crossroads that I'm currently at. And what I've realized very recently is not only will I never really arrive, but in many ways, I've been at that crossroads for as long as I can remember. I've had 3 years of quite literally being ripped down to the studs and rebuilding my identity. And even if you haven't spent 3 years feeling like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know when you're in the trenches. You know when you almost always feel like you're never going to get to the other side. It feels like an impossible task. And it feels like you don't have anything worthy of sharing with anyone else. So, why does it feel like there's no content for the in between? Why does it feel like no one ever really speaks about this moment? Why does almost every post, podcast, book, and course make us feel like we're just not good enough? Why, even when someone tries to share about the experience they had, does it feel like that was the experience 10 years ago that they're now so far removed from that it doesn't actually speak to how we're feeling? It doesn't speak to the actual experience of working on yourself and of really going through it. Because most of what I see and hear isn't genuinely asking, what do I know now that I wish I'd known then? The real answer to that question is so much messier than most people are willing to admit publicly. Instead, we're presented with answers from a perfectly solid ground, from a place of safety. There's no trembling, there's no texture to that experience, there's no struggle. And the distance between the summit and the valley is so massive. If you're only speaking from the summit without remembering what it felt like to be in the valley, that's going to constantly leave people feeling like they're not good enough. And it's not going to actually help them move forward. You're just motivated and inspired for 5 seconds, and then you find yourself exhausted and burnt out all over again. And sometimes even more so because that short stint of motivation and inspiration that you had from the person that shared from the summit excited you so much that you pushed further than you even had the ability to. You didn't have that energy. You didn't have it in you. You've already felt so broken, and that didn't actually fix something in you. It just gave you a little burst, it just gave you a little taste. But we don't need these 3 steps to success anymore. We need to be seen and heard, especially while we are in the part of the journey that makes us want to quit, when the summit feels completely impossible to attain. And I finally realized why that summit feels so impossible to reach. Because most of us are far too hard on ourselves to recognize when we've actually reached one. There isn't this perfectly big summit of wild success to reach and to arrive and to aspire to, that once we get there, we never have anything else to work on. The people that make it look that way have found something and have clung to it. They aren't continuing to do the inner work, at least not in the way that really puts them in the trenches and in the valley again. Maybe sometimes they slip from the summit ever so slightly, but they just get themselves right back up again. And those are the cute little moments they share where they had a rough conversation with their partner, or they had a bad month in their business. That's not the same thing as having to rebuild everything all over again. That's not the same thing as allowing yourself to let go of a version of yourself that just no longer fits anymore. That's still performance, just to make sure that you never have to come back down and you never have to know what that feels like. And so most of us don't arrive in the way that the internet describes it. It's reached while we're still amongst so much of the mess, sometimes only for a short period of time, sometimes in one area of life and not another. You might have an extraordinary year in a relationship that you have and a devastating one at work, or finally feel at home in your own body while everything else around you is falling apart. There isn't some perfect arrival where all the pieces click into place all at once. And if they do, that might happen for all of 5 seconds, but that's just not real life. And it looks nothing like what other people are sharing. So we don't even count our own wins. If everything isn't clicking, if we can't turn it into this perfect story, we just feel like it doesn't actually matter. We just continue to feel like we're perpetually in the valley, waiting for something that may have already happened without the same level of fanfare that we're expecting. I know that feeling deeply. I know that feeling from the inside. And spending the last 3 years navigating my gender transition, almost constantly in flux, has come with more upheaval than the first 28 years of my life combined. I've had moments of clarity and joy, but I've had far more moments of fog and collapse than I ever could have imagined. I spent so much of the last 3 years being so entirely confused, not necessarily about who I am, but about what I really want. Because when you're ripped down to the studs in that way, you start to question everything else. You question relationship dynamics. You question your own definitions of success. You question whether or not you even like the same food or want to keep the same hobbies. You start to think about your entire world so entirely differently than you ever have before. And every once in a while, I got the chance to feel on top of the world. And I would always grasp at it in the same way that most of the people on the internet are, kept hoping that it will last. But it never really does, at least not when you admit to yourself that something is off, that there is still something to work on. Because inevitably, I always find more inner work to do. There's always something about myself that is ready to be shed, that is ready to fall away, because we are such fluid human beings. And we struggle to admit that to ourselves. We love to find ways to plant our flag in the ground and say, this is where I'm at. This is what's worked for me. This is what I've built my success on. Instead of actually taking the time to continue to develop and to continue to learn more about who we really are. And what I've come to understand is that for the people doing the real inner work, not the bypassy spiritual bullshit that's fun to share on the internet, the in between never really ends. It just changes texture, but you don't actually graduate out of it. You just get better at recognizing when you're inside of it, and you get better at learning to find clarity and joy simultaneously to all of the fog and collapse and struggle. You learn that you can feel many different things all at the same time. And this realization shifted something profoundly in me. I finally stopped framing it as I'm sharing from this place until I arrive, and started understanding it as this is just what my journey looks like. This is not some grand hero's journey, and I don't need to paint that picture. And that reframe has done so much more for my self worth than any win or any external validation ever has. Because I'm no longer measuring myself against everyone else's highlight reel and coming up short. I could give a fuck that someone else thinks that they have it all figured out, and that that's the place that they're going to sell you from, and that they're going to give you their perfect 5 steps or their perfect pillars and their perfect process. Because I'm building something that actually belongs to me. I'm building a very different foundation, and I'm sharing from a place that's raw and real. And I'm not doing that just because I'm where I'm at right now, and because I haven't had the success and I don't have the followers and I don't have the subscribers. This is just who I am. This is just how I'm going to share. This is just the version of me that you're always going to see. I'm not going to suddenly get some money and have a certain amount of success and then look back and create some perfect way of doing something. Instead, I'm going to continue to share from a place that you can actually recognize, a place that, if nothing else, will let you know that you're not alone in this. And I understand that you're going to struggle with what I'm going to say sometimes, because it's not going to tell you exactly what to do next. But the thing is it's going to tell you exactly what you need. There's going to be breadcrumbs and lessons, and just the energy of what I'm saying is going to help you figure out what your next steps are. And I realize that's really uncomfortable, because we're so used to reading books and taking courses and listening to podcasts and doing things that tell us something that connects with our mind, that makes us feel really logical and like we're on top of things. You know that feeling after You read the perfect book or listen to the most amazing podcast that tells you something, that motivates you, and that inspires you. It's similar to how you feel when you see a really good post, but you know that doesn't last. You know you feel a lot up here, and then there's never much that changes. You probably have grown from some of the things you've read and some of the courses you've taken. But what I would suggest is that you probably haven't grown nearly as much as you've want to. You haven't seen the progress that you've really been looking for. You've secretly been craving something so much more, and no one else is giving it to you. And so, what you're actually craving is you're just craving someone sharing from this very real place. You're craving someone who helps you see that they understand, who helps you see that you're not actually alone. And so, while you would be a lot more comfortable and you would probably be a lot more likely to subscribe really quickly if I were to have some perfect product or service for you, that's not what I want to do. That's not what you actually need. And that's just not who I am. And so I'm not going to lie to you about the in between because it's not just a waiting room. It's not a part of the journey that you have to white knuckle yourself through. This is it. This is the real journey. The real journey is messy. The real journey has fog and reconstruction and small wins that you almost talked yourself out of counting. And the people who need to hear from you most are not waiting for you to arrive. They're not waiting for me to arrive. They're in the middle of it right now, looking for someone who remembers what it actually feels like to be there. Someone who's actually capable of saying, hey, take my hand. I don't know exactly where we're going, but I'll walk with you. I'm going to do this thing with you because I'm not scared to be standing here. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not in the trenches. I'm not going to cling to the summit or to that last small win that I had because that's just not who I am. So I've stopped reaching for that summit. I've stopped reaching for some point of arrival, not because I failed, but because I'm not sure it exists the way that I was taught to want it anyway. And that's why I can't give you these clean lessons or these 5 steps, because the truth is just infinitely messier than that. And I would be doing you a disservice to pretend otherwise. So, instead, I will leave you with this. I will leave you with some tangible advice. If you want to know what's truly going to help you on your journey and what's truly helped me in mine, never stop asking why. And this is not in the way that you might think. We're quick to ask questions like, why am I not good enough? Why am I a failure? Why am I broken? What I pose is that we're not quick enough to ask, is this even real? Why doesn't this work for me? Is this message meant for someone else entirely? What actually works for me? Because we're all so very unique. We are also very connected. I'm not talking about uniqueness and individuality in a really bullshit, egotistical, narcissistic way. But you have your own unique way of doing things. You have the way that things are meant to work for you, or I should say, at least the most effortless way, because life should feel fun and effortless, at least to an extent. It's not going to feel perfectly that way in every single moment, but you shouldn't feel like everything is a complete grind, and you shouldn't feel like you're always pushing and struggling and forcing things to happen. Yes, you're going to feel like that some of the time, but what I've learned is that's mostly a signal for the things that aren't working. And so the reason why I'm doing this the way I am, the reason why I'm sharing from the in between is not because I figured out that no one else is sharing from the messiness and I can practically just have a monopoly on it if I become the person that's actually sharing from this really honest and authentic place. This wasn't some beautiful marketing plan or cute strategy. This was just a realization of who I am, an understanding that when I share from this place, it flows extremely effortlessly. I don't have to sit here and think about what I want to share with you and about whether I'm good enough to do it. I just know that this is what I'm meant to be sharing with you, at least at this point in my life. But honestly, I can't imagine this ever changing because this was a lesson that the universe was trying to teach me for as long as I can remember. I can't remember a time where I wasn't trying to attain something, where I wasn't trying to be more performative and perfect. This is just who I am. It's not a failure, it's an understanding that people actually need someone who shares from the messiness, someone who shows them that they're not alone, someone who shows them that there's someone actually walking through this with them, because it does really suck sometimes. I love myself and my life infinitely more than I did 3 years ago, but there's not some perfect version of that. I'm not suddenly like so much happier than I ever was all the time. I've still had those moments of fog and collapse. I've still had a lot of frustration and struggle and depression, and just like I've lost myself many times throughout this process. But that doesn't mean that I'm still not in a better place. That doesn't mean that I'm not continuing to enjoy my life infinitely more. For one thing, I'm enjoying sharing with you because I'm no longer doing this from a place of insecurity or from a place of trying to just make a bunch of money or to sell you something. I'm doing this because this is the work I actually care about. These are the things I love talking about that I could just help people with for hours and hours. And it doesn't drain me, it gives me energy. And so I'm not suggesting that you should throw away every single piece of advice at your fingertips, but you have to learn to start running them through a very different filter. One where you trust yourself a little more. One where you trust that feeling when you're reading something and something inside of you quietly says, I'm not sure that's the whole story. That's not an instinct of self doubt. That's just discernment. And that's you knowing yourself better than the algorithm does. I guarantee you're feeling it right now. You're feeling my energy. You're feeling me sharing from a very different place than most people ever have. And it's probably hitting you one of two ways. It's either really, really uncomfortable because it's so real and that feels like a lot, or, and maybe even both at the same time, it feels really refreshing and honest and authentic. And it feels like you can finally exhale because I'm not pitching you something. I'm not performing in front of you. I'm just showing you what it's like to actually be me so that you have permission to actually be you. And that's what the world needs more of. That's what I'm here to share. That's the kind of thing you deserve to feel when you're reading other books and taking other courses and listening to other podcasts. And I'm not saying to never listen to something that challenges your perspective. I was listening to a podcast last night that was triggering me a little bit about some things relationship wise, but it wasn't doing it from an inauthentic place. It wasn't doing it from a really shitty place of telling me that like I was wrong. It was someone sharing something from a non-judgmental place that I don't entirely agree with, but it was still worth me seeing it from their lens. It was worth me understanding what I might not be seeing, what I might not have been willing to take a look at. So you don't need a perfect roadmap. You need a better compass. And that compass has been inside of you the entire time. No matter what I share with you here, you are the one who has to guide yourself through the darkness, which is why there's no clean lessons and there's no perfect steps. I'm just someone a little further down the path. I'm just someone deciding to walk with you and to say, I see you, I know this terrain, and we can keep going, and we're going to do it together.